right of descent, as my father was South African born.
Okay. Thank you, members. Honorable Sedi.
Morning, Judge Greenland. We have 5 minutes to share as we interact. I would appreciate if you can be very brief in your responses so that you are able to do justice to your responses. It will work in your favor in any way. I'm sure you are aware that beside the nine executive directors, we also have executive directors as part of the board. But there is a debate going on now which suggests that their role and their powers need to be reviewed. The executive directors. What is your view on that particular aspect, and why do you think it would be a wise move to take?
From my understanding of the Act, the current model stipulates that the CEO, the COO, and the CFO, despite being part of executive management, are executive directors. I, with the greatest respect, think that that is fatally flawed. In terms of any test, whether it's jurisprudential or in terms of governance or even matching this to the King reports, you cannot have a situation where people are accounting and reporting to themselves. It is a reality that the SABC management as a whole must report and count to the board. Therefore, you cannot have members of that management team on the board, because then they are reporting and accounting to themselves. That is a complete conflict of interest. With respect.
Okay, no, thanks. The relationship between the SABC and the regulator, I'm sure you might have done some research about it in one or another. What is the current state of affairs? And if appointed a board member, how do you see yourself improving that kind of a relationship?
Well, I think that the fact that you have this model where you have a regulator is very good in principle. And taking that court case that occurred, or the dispute that occurred between the regulator and the SABC, proved the utility of that model, because the regulator was absolutely right in its attitude that the SABC cannot curtail information for political reasons. So I'm saying the model is a good one, and it needs to be, its value needs to be leveraged.
What do you understand to be the role of the SABC in the DTT project? And how do you see them, SABC, assisting to make sure that this time around we don't miss the deadline? I'm sure you're aware that we missed it in 2015 in terms of what we said we would have done by then. What do you understand to be the role of the SABC in the DTT project?
I understand DTT to be an acronym which stands for Digital Terrestrial Transmission. Am I correct? I think that in terms of the on a technical basis, DTT confers an enormous advantage because of the increased bandwidth and the more efficient use of radio frequency. What it means is that the SABC will be better positioned to discharge its legislative mandate to cover all the people of this country. I suspect that there are struggles in this department because, for instance, immediately it'll be able to put in place more channels And when you consider that under the law, it's required to actually reach all the tribal groupings of this country and broadcast in at least 11 languages, then you can see the advantage of having digital technology.
Last one, Chair. Can you take us through the process of appointing a board of the SABC? The process.
In terms of the Act, there have to be 15 members appointed. And as I understand it, we are seeing the process in action. This committee of Parliament, delegated by Parliament, interviews the candidates for their qualifications, expertise, and experience, and has to come to the conclusion that as a collective, they are able to discharge the imperatives of the enabling legislation. A recommendation is then made to the President, and it's the President that actually makes the appointments.
Thanks, Chairman.
Judge, your ID starts with 2 stars, and it's 0729511704. Can you clarify that?
I actually, Mr. Chairman, I must apologize. I don't know the significance of the stars at all. All I can tell you is that I applied for citizenship on the basis of right of descent. And because my father was South African born and my grandfather was South African resident.
No, I understand that, Judge,
Yeah.
but can you clarify is it your ID number?
Yes, my ID number is 0729511704.
It's a South African identity document.
It is indeed. I can produce it, Mr. Chairman, for examination.
No, the reason I ask, it's a funny ID. It's not a usual one.
Well, perhaps some of...
No, I'm not... yeah. It's in your CV, that's what is... You were saying your ID number is 07929.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, 0729, 430729.
Yeah. Yes, the ID copy is okay. It's like what you are saying, but in your CV, it starts with 2 stars and 0729. I wanted to clarify that. But your copy of the copy of your ID, it's 43. Blah blah blah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's because when I compiled the CD, I was trying to conceal my age because the 43 betrays your age.
I see. And I don't see you'll pardon me, I don't see where you started schooling in your CV.
Well, as I said in my introduction to you, I started schooling in a Roman Catholic institution called Sacred Heart Home, which is at a little place called Esigodini, just outside Bulawayo in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, no, I heard that, but okay. Honorable Kungubela.
Thank you, Honorable Judge. I'm also must express my gratitude that we are interacting with men of your stature who has opted to apply for this job. Firstly, my question would be, you must have been interacting with the life of SABC. And in doing so, that must have motivated you to apply. What are the 2 or 3 things in that space of interaction that made you to take a decision to apply regarding the life of SABC?
Thank you for your kind remarks. I think maybe the chairman's right is that perhaps I'm a funny person. However, I think all us South African citizens have a relationship with the SABC. It's unavoidable because it's a broadcast medium, and I often tune for very good reasons. For instance, I'm an addict about Checkpoint and a special assignment, and also as regards the parliamentary channel, especially with the contest on a very critically important issue here, and that was as regards the constitutional problems we had. And so, yes, it is a fact of life. I appreciate the service that is provided. And I was also, like many South Africans, intrigued by the problems that arose and were sensationalized in the media. And I think that the SABC is in a state of crisis. And I think that in terms of my experience, I'm able to assist. I also need more to do. At the moment, I'm a little bit underemployed. Playing golf.
Sorry, Honorable Judge. Can you, in crystal terms, when you say state of crisis, in concrete terms, what expression do they find, 2 or 3?
Well, I think the SABC is no longer, well, in recent times has lost its functional integrity. It has become functional, it has become dysfunctional. And one can elaborate on that. In the end, I think there were no board members, or there was one board member, and there was a confrontation with the minister, etc., etc. That is a state of extreme crisis.
What can you do about that?
I think that what now needs to be done is what now actually is happening, is that this esteemed committee selects people who have got the qualifications, expertise, and experience, put a new board in place, and then leverage the very good act that is the SABC Act, the very good charter, the very good code of conduct, the very good code of ethics, code of practice, and the editorial policies. When one reads these documents, this SAB should be a world-beating example of, as a broadcaster.
Thank you, Judge. I think we are running short of time. My last question is, can you share with us your understanding of the South African broadcasting system in terms of its components, and how do you understand them?
Well, I think the objectives are clearly set out. There must be a reach to all the people of South Africa as regards information, education, and entertainment. And it must be packaged in a way that becomes embedded so as to advance the interests of all the people. But when you talk about understanding, I want to make a distinction. We can talk a lot about the what and the how. In other words, what must be done, how it must be done, and by whom. I'm more interested in the understanding, because we must think it through. You see, human beings spend a whole life being educated, and you have your formal education at school and at university. But real education starts the moment you enter the world. And at that point...
Respect, Judge.
Yes.
With respect, because I think our time is gone. The point I'm making is that I asked you to share with us your understanding of the South African broadcasting system, not necessarily the set of the objects of the Broadcasting Act.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Judge. Honorable Machoba.
Good morning. Baba Christopher, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, welcome. to the committee. My question is very simple. SABC has lost a market share in the African continent according to the 2016 Media Trends Report. What do you think SABC should do to recover for the next future?
Okay, thank you. I think marketing is not my field. However, I would say the starting point is the common sense one. Engage those who have been successful at marketing. Is there no reason why we cannot engage somebody like the CEO of Alibaba? I think that should be the starting point. After that, it's a matter of acquiring the experts to advise and help in redressing that particular problem.
Okay. My last question. What type of a strategic partnership should SABC establish with Chapter 9 institution given the prominent role they need to play in society?
I think in terms of a strategic plan, and there should be one in place, one of the imperatives is that there should be a relationship with all the constitutional bodies, especially Chapter 9 institutions, because there is no ways that you can discharge your duty to uplift all South Africans if you don't have an understanding that those South Africans' human rights are impacted by those other constitutional organs of states. So there has to be an embedded, formal relationship with all those institutions.
Thank you very much, Honorable Van Dam.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, Judge Greenland. I wanted to say to you, age is nothing but a number. I was born exactly 40 years after you were born, and here both of us sit. Why the SABC? I mean, you're in retirement. Why do you want to come out of retirement to serve on the SABC board?
It's a challenge. It's a habit. I think that there is a problem, and I think I can make a useful contribution. I am retired, but I feel that I'm underemployed. I need more to do. Just playing golf and making speeches, I don't think is enough. I'm young at heart.
But why specifically the SABC? I mean, there's other boards, there's other vocations that you can engage in. Why the SABC?
I should tell you that it's no secret that you only get on boards in terms of who you know. I don't know of any political connections. I don't know any important people. So I'm underutilized. I think if, for instance, if I was in Zimbabwe, I probably would be on 6 or 8 boards. But in South Africa, I don't have friends in high places. And I think that is something that should commend itself to this committee, because it means that I don't owe anybody anything, and nobody owes me anything. So you need that type of person on this board.
I tend to agree with you in that regard.
Perhaps you'll be able to help me get onto a few more boards.
I'm just a member of the opposition. We don't have that kind of power. If there was a stop it, guys. If there's one thing you'd like to change at the SABC, what would it be?
I would be concerned with understanding, as I was saying earlier, that, you know, good people can have skills, can have experience, and can have the best intentions. But if there's a gap in understanding, then that gap, if it's a 5 or 10% gap, can translate to a 50 or 60% failure. And the point that I was trying to make to your other esteemed member is that when SABC, or if SABC fails in informing and educating people, they are unable to acquire the means to realize their full potential. So the Bill of Rights becomes an unattainable target for them. So that it's so critical that that education that is and information that is supplied by SABC is achieved at optimal levels. So it becomes a social justice issue. So this would be let's say, a pet concern of mine if I was on the SABC board, is to instill this understanding throughout the whole corporation.
How would you improve on the SABC's public education mandate? How would you, if you served on the board, ensure that the SABC provided programming, that provided education for the South African public?
That can only be done in terms of a strategic plan. I believe that the first thing that's got to happen is that the board's got to get together. We have to have a workshop or symposium, whatever you call it, and we have to make sure that by the end of that, we all understand our role. There has to be a strategic plan in which all those objectives are set out. And then executive management has to be held to account in terms of deliverables that are timed and delivered on time. So there has to be that level of formal accountability.
Honourable Davis.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, sir, for making yourself available for these interviews. A couple of years ago, there was an unlawful removal of 3 board members. It was Ronnie Lubisi, Rachel Kaladas, and Hope Zinde. Can you tell us why these removals were unlawful, why due process was not followed?
I am actually challenged by that question. What I knew about it was only what was reported in the media, and I did not do an analysis of it. What I would say that board members should, under the Act intends that they have security as regards the discharge of their duties. And if the removal was on political grounds, then it's clearly unlawful.
Thanks. There are 2 key regulators of the SABC. One is ICASA, and the other is the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Can you outline the key differences between the roles of each regulator?
Sorry, can you give me the name of the second one?
The Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa.
Yeah, the difference would be that ICASA is the first instance regulator in classical format. In other words, ICASA's duty would be to oversee that the entity is in compliance with its obligations under the Act. So ICASA is there to enforce the fundamental imperatives of the duties and responsibilities of the SABC. A complaints entity is what its name indicates. It's a must be. I'm taking an educated guess here. It must be a formal way of resolving issues of dissatisfaction. So ICASA is concerned with the first level management of risk from start to finish, whereas a complaints entity would be to deal with complaints as they arise.
Thank you. My last question is on the Public Protector's report that was released in 2013, entitled When Governance and Ethics Fail. Now, one of the key recommendations of the Public Protector's report was that the board hold a disciplinary inquiry into the fitness of Claudi Motswaneng to hold office following the findings that he'd committed fraud and was involved in various other misdemeanors while he was the COO. The minister stopped the board from carrying out the recommendation of the Public Protector. If you had been a board member at that time, up against a powerful minister and up against a powerful executive director like Mr. Motswaneng, what would you have done at that time to get those recommendations implemented? How would you have stood up to the minister and the executive director?
Thank you for what, with respect, is a very easy question. I would have done the obvious, and that is insist that the Constitution be respected, that the Act be respected, that corporate governance be respected. It's not rocket science that the Public Protector is a Chapter 9 institution and that the Public Protector's rulings are binding unless set aside in terms of review by the superior courts. That was not rocket science. I don't think this was a difficult issue in principle for board members. I think that every board member, and if I was on the board, I would have made it absolutely clear that this was unconstitutional and the board would have a responsibility to take it to court.
So you would have insisted, but what if nobody had listened to you? What action would you have taken? Because there were board members who took the same view as you, but no action was taken. Well, I'm asking you what action you would have taken if you were on the board.
The only one then available to me, and that is to come to this committee and ask, beg, plead with this committee to take this matter to Parliament.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Davis. Honorable Ndoze.
How are you, Judge?
Fine, thank you.
Why did you leave Zimbabwe?
When I was a baby, I underwent an Ndebele custom Lungisa ritual. When I turned 18, my aunt took me to another Sangoma, who then picked up, much to my astonishment, that I had been Lungisa'd by this Sangoma. And he expressed his joy at being in the presence of the spirit of this man, which shocked me rigid, since I didn't know the Sangoma at all. And then in 1992, my aunt, my mother's sister-in-law, Mam Kwebu, she was a spiritualist, traveled 400 kilometers and came to see me and said, your life is in danger. This country is going to collapse. This was also astonishing, because in 1992, there was nothing wrong with Zimbabwe. And as a result, but because 1992. 92.
You left on the advice of a spirit.
Yes.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
So if you're disappointed that I'm here, you must understand.
No, I'm not disappointed. I'm asking a question, Judge. That's.
Yes.
I would hope you don't interpret my intentions. Now, many people would say maybe you want to be the Mugabe of the SABC at 74. How would you respond to that? I mean, why would we put you? Even Nelson Mandela was refusing to be president at that age.
I doubt very much if many people would say that. I have to say, with the greatest of respect, that I have, I think, quite a commendable fan base, simply because of my contributions on the Oscar Pistorius trial of the century. And most people like me. They're not going to say I'm like Mugabe.
No. By Mugabe, I mean the social meaning of age. There are a lot of people, what it is, Judge, is there is a reality to the fact that you are 74, that's why you are no longer on the bench, that's why you are no longer active. Why would we take you and put you in the SABC board when the social meaning of your age is precisely that you shouldn't be working hard?
I don't think I would be working hard in relation to my state of health and the level of my abilities. If you want to test me out, please, I can challenge you to a golf game tomorrow.
You said earlier on that here in South Africa you don't owe anybody. That's why you are not, in any boards. You don't have friends in high places.
There's no doubt about that.
Yes, but you do have friends in Zimbabwe. Someone could say maybe that's who you owe. Because SABC broadcasts for the continent, not just for South Africa.
Yes, that is true. About that first half of your question, it's significant that I've been on 2 boards in Botswana, but not in South Africa, which is my country. Zimbabwe is out of the question for very serious reasons. for 3.6 million of us. For instance,
Well, I'm saying, Judge, the redemption I'm giving you an opportunity for is that your friends in Zim or the friends in Botswana, which you are adding, will not be able to influence your independence in the board. That's the opportunity central to this question for you to express yourself on.
That is true, except that nobody would be able to influence me on any board in any country. So does that answer your question?
Okay, the funding model of the SABC, one of the big problems, the thing here, just to conclude the last question, is that you've got to appreciate the SABC is playing on a continental stage. So the influences are across and maybe even internationally. But funding model, it's going through a lot of problems. It's asking the government at the moment to bail it out with an amount of about 2 billion. That's one of the most immediate challenges the board will have to deal with. What is your take on how to improve funding in the SABC?
I think, firstly, the fact that the SABC has imploded indicates that the probability is that part of the financial problem is due to mismanagement and or corruption and or ineptitude. So I think as a board, the first thing that I would want to see is proof of efficiencies at every level in the organization. And then, of course, we have to make sure that license collection is efficient. And then, as I had said earlier, why don't we consult? There must be other broadcasters on this planet that are very successful.
Okay.
Get their advice.
Finally, do you watch the SABC?
Off and on.
What's your favorite program except the news?
The program that I like, SABC TV 1. It might be because Peter Ndoro had me as a guest on the...
What's your favorite program on the SABC except the news?
Checkpoint.
It's the news.
Honorable Matisha.
And Checkpoint is on ENCA, Judge.
Thank you very much, Honorable Judge. It's nice to interact with you. You have earlier on spoke about the Constitution. Okay. Now, Chapter 10 of the Constitution provides that public administration in South Africa must be governed by the democratic values and principles enshrined in the Constitution, and that these principles apply to the SABC as well. Now, despite the SABC being governed in part by the Companies Act, kindly give me your views of the ethic that should apply to the SABC and its governance. What values and principles should apply?
I think firstly there has to be an understanding of the Constitution in all its aspects. I am not at all sure that most of us have that understanding. The schools don't teach understanding. I was so thrilled when on an SABC channel I heard a program in terms of which there was a short excerpt where an extract of the Constitution was then explained. That really thrilled me. So that has to be the starting point. The Constitution has to be embedded as a living document, and there has to be, as I had said earlier, a promotion of the understanding throughout the SABC of the Constitution. It is a huge issue, and it should go into the education and promotion of the understanding of the Constitution should go into the strategic plan with measures to see whether or not, over time, that understanding is being embedded.
Thank you, Honorable Judge. There's the second question. The infamous Nkandla judgment, and I'm sure you are aware of that, contains numerous references to the notion of governance and those values and principles that constitute good governance. In fact, it is as much a story of what happens when governance goes wrong as it was or has happened with SABC. What, in your view, Judge, constitutes good as against bad and governance, and how would you give effect to this with regard to the SABC board and its roles and responsibilities?
I think that in terms of the Act, in terms of the Charter, in terms of the Code of Conduct, you've already got the rules of governance very eloquently set out in, I believe, at a world-beating level of quality. What was or appears to have been lacking is a commitment to an enforcement of those rules of conduct, and operational mode and culture. Now, that can only occur if the institution, the corporation, is firstly properly led, and that the staff respect the leadership, and that they are embedded rules of conduct that ensure the integrity of operational mode and conduct. That has to go into a strategic plan with measures to see to what extent it has been achieved.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Madisha. Honorable Tolashe.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Good morning, Honorable Judge.
Good morning.
Noting the fact that you are bringing a lot of knowledge and skills, I would want you to please explicitly explain your knowledge on the sector by talking to us on your understanding on the Broadcasting Amendment Bill, and how is it going to assist the SABC, and how is it going to affect the ordinary people. But also, if you can please talk to me about the issue of how ICASA and SABC relates. But also, as the last one, Chairperson, just please mention some that you'll be comfortable with areas in the Broadcasting Act. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, firstly, I want to correct you. I don't actually have much knowledge of the SABC and its history and the way it works. I have to put that up front. I think what I do have is the understanding of what needs to be done to ensure that it succeeds in its mandate. As regards ICASA, it's as I said, it's a first instance regulator, and it's there to, as an independent body, independent from the SABC, is there to ensure compliance on the part of SABC. Its value has already been proved in terms of the example that I gave. I made a note of the first half of your question. Can you remind me of it, the first half?
Chairperson, thank you. You've covered the first. The second one is about the ICASA. The last one, I wanted you to reflect on some sections within the Broadcasting Act.
Oh, yeah. Can I talk about amendment? There's only 2 amendments in terms of my limited knowledge of the whole legislative model that I would like to see implemented. And that is, firstly, that executive management must be removed from the board. and must be required to report to the board, not to be part of the board. And I'd also like to see a more astute management of the minister's role. At the moment, in terms of the Act, the responsibilities for discharging the legislative mandate of the SABC is actually vested in the minister, not in the board. I think that needs to change. It should be vested in the board, with the board being required to report to the government via this committee. Those are the two amendments that I would like to see.
Thank you very much, Honorable Tolashe. Honorable Kalako.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Judge Greenland.
Good morning.
Welcome. My question, your opinion, you know, here in South Africa we have Department of Communication, and also we have a Department of Telecommunications and Postal Services. Around the issue of ICASA, what is your opinion? Where should ICASA reside? Should it report only to telecoms, that is Telecommunications and Postal Services Department or Minister? As it now, it reports to both. Is it not a conflict because SABC also is under Department of Communication? They all sit there. When there are these issues of complaints against the SABC regarding issues around editorial policy, does not that create a problem, in your view?
Yes. Look, I don't have expertise on this without one would need to research. What I would say is...
Your mic is not on.
Sorry, I don't have expertise on this, and I would have to actually research it, because it's a very complex question. What I would say is that ICASA, in principle, is necessary. You need a regulator, and then you need compliance. But however, I agree with you, there should not be confusion about the role it plays. I think that if there's confusion, it should not be such a difficult issue to remove that confusion.
Thanks. This is not a question, it's just my comment on what you alluded to here earlier, where I disagree with you, that people, despite their qualifications and experience, in order to be in any board or council or agents of state or in any position in government, they must know some politician or an acquaintance of a politician or a family of somebody like me who's in parliament or Van Dam. That is completely wrong. And it borders on nepotism and corruption. It is something which we cannot just leave it on itself. That is why we are actually striving to get rid of that, because that's a sickness in governments all over the world. In other governments, it becomes worse, it becomes a norm. It becomes an accepted practice. So coming that from a judge is shocking.
Yes, I've got a habit of just speaking the truth without fear, favor, or prejudice. I am absolutely convinced that if I had friends in high places, I would be on at least 3 or 4 boards in this country.
Yes, Chair, I want really to thank the judge for his honesty, because that's what is very important.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Judge. I'm sure you are familiar with the SABC 8 case, the 8 journalists. You are not. And then I can't ask you a question on that one. Because it was quite an important case for you to follow, but also for you to research everything that is related to SABC board. Well, you are not familiar with that. Secondly, will you share with us if Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, the committees, if there are areas where we fail to perform oversight, or areas where we failed to perform oversight on SABC?
I am not aware that you have failed to perform oversight. The impression that I have is that the SABC board did not come to you. I might be wrong in that. If it's a situation that the board came to you, or members of the board came to you, and then you did nothing about the plight, about the implosion that was occurring, then indeed you have failed with the greatest of respect. But I don't know those facts.
All right, thank you very much, Judge. If you have questions for the members, you are free to ask any question.
The question that I would put is that I wonder if any of you share the opinion that I might be too old, but you don't have to answer it. because I think I'm actually very young, because I was born very young.
No, let me handle the question. Judge, there is nothing wrong with your age, for as long as you can perform the task. So I disagree with those who say age is a disadvantage to you. You can definitely perform the task if, despite the age, if you are equal to the task. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.